Be here today. Listen, I'm glad that you're here because there's somebody I want to introduce to you formally. Many of you who are around the church or been here for some time, you already know him. You know who he is, and or at least you've seen him lurking in the background. He's not really a foreground person. I've been trying to push him into the spotlight and push him into the full promise of his capacity. And listen, it is a major coup. I really know God to get this brother right here on stage to talk to us, to share with us, and just have a great, candid conversation. And those of you who don't know, his name is Mark Wells. Just a little bit of insight as to what he's meant to Victory, to my ministry, to me personally. He's a friend, he's a brother, but he's also one of the counsels for me in everything business. He is an accomplished businessman. I won't even go down his resume. He's got a lot of things that he's done. He's been the owner or had ownership in banks. He has owned major restaurants around the country, and he's a real estate guru, real estate broker. He doesn't do it before you call his office. He will tell you, no, I don't really do that. He does it for his business sake, but trust me, he is masterful. We were able to acquire all the properties that we acquired at Victory because of this brother right here. Single-handedly, he came in after God twisted his arm. After God twisted his arm and pushed him in the back and said, you're going to help God's people and you're going to help this church. And so he has been a help to your pastor. And I'm just grateful that he's here to hang out with us. Again, his name is Pastor. He won't take that. Brother Mark Wells, and welcome him as we go into a real candid conversation dealing with wealth. You ready? If you're ready, say you're ready. Come on. Say, I'm ready, Pastor. I'm ready, Brother Mark. All right, here it is. Check this out. Before we get in here, you know I don't do anything without the Word of God. I just want to remind you of the scripture that we dealt with last week. Here it is, real simple. Ecclesiastes 7:12. For wisdom is a defense. When you have wisdom, you can defend your potential, your possibility, and or you can put up a proper defense against the tricks and traps of the enemy. Wisdom gives you the capacity to overcome the things that the enemy would throw your way. And money is a defense. When you have resources, when you accumulate wealth, not when you acquire riches, not when you get money, but when you accumulate wealth, it becomes a defense. If someone were in your family were to become seriously injured, seriously ill, or just in trouble, I don't know whether you realize it or not, but if you have money, it won't take you 5 days to get there, but it may take you 5 hours, if or less. If you can go and literally jump on a plane or charter a plane, if that is your circumstance. And so just myriads of ways. I don't want you to believe or to think in any regard that money is the answer to all of your problems, but it does make life easier. And it makes your ability to represent Christ easier because now you can reach more people, do more good, serve more people, be more generous. And so I want to make sure that you understand that's why we're doing this series called Hidden Figures. And that's also why I have invited Brother Mark Wells to have a conversation because he's raw, candid, praise saints. He lives in the house with a prayer warrior. But I'm so glad and so grateful that he is here with us today. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for hanging out. And I don't know, do I need to anoint you now as Pastor Mark, or
You better put your hands and feet on me there.
Anybody that knows Brother Mark knows and understands that he is a businessman that God has arrested and has really worked on his heart and his life. And I've seen so much growth in you and so much that God has done. And thank you for being a huge contributor to the kingdom.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
I've grown a great deal under, your watch.
Praise God.
A great deal.
And I've grown in business a great deal under your watch.
Iron sharpens iron.
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
Right.
So I wanted to talk for a minute about thinking wealthy, not rich. A lot of people will grab resources or riches or money, and they want to use that money frivolously or unwisely. And that means that they have to learn new habits. You know, in order to think wealthy and not rich, you have to learn the habits of wealthy people. And so that's really the topic or the course of our conversation is the habits of wealthy people. So let me admonish people first and foremost, go get you a financial planner. All right. We're people who have experiential knowledge, but that is not the field that we profess to be in as financial planners. We're giving you insight. We're giving you a way, but not the way. There are myriads of ways, but these ways that we're going to discuss today or some of the things we'll talk about are proven to us. There have been things that we've experienced, and I know that you've experienced even at a greater capacity. So tell me about wealth. What are the habits of wealthy people?
Well, there are many habits of wealthy people. First of all, let me make the distinction between wealth and rich.
Okay.
Riches is more, when a person says I'm rich, one thinks they have money. And money is a tangible tool. Whereas wealth, on the other hand, money is an ingredient of wealth to some degree, but wealth is much more global than just being rich. And so if I'm wealthy, I have relationships. The wealth model is primarily built on relationships. So in my time, in my matriculation from going to, say, rich to wealthy, I can say that I'm wealthy, and that doesn't mean I have Oprah-type money or LeBron's-type money, but that means to me is
just
that
almost.
What it means is that, I spent a large part of my life building relationships. And so whereas rich is fleeting, you can be rich today and, go on tomorrow. You never hear a wealthy person say, I lost it all. A rich person will say, I lost it all. Because what they're talking about is I lost all my money. So a wealthy person say, I lost it all. That means, well, what did you do? You lost all your relationships? You may have a good relationship with your wife, your friends, your business community. You don't lose those overnight. However, money you can lose overnight.
How in that regard, how do relationships bring that level of value that you would constitute yourself as wealthy?
Well, let me give you a personal experience. In 2008, 2009, I woke up, one morning, I was telling, Regina, my wife, I said, listen, the banks that I have a majority stake in are gone or will be gone shortly. The restaurants are, they're not doing any business. My real estate, the values of the real estate is not where they were, yesterday. So my primary core businesses, were floundering. So, however, at that point, my attitude was, well, something will happen. God is good, right? And so the wealth model kicks in. I would say, 6 months, a year, whatever, I get a call from an associate and says, Mark, I got a business opportunity for you. In a matter of months, I had the riches back, that tangible money. Had it not been for that, those relationships that I cultured when I had it. See, one thing when you're rich, you made a mention that, I listened to your sermons, obviously, because, I'm a victory walker. And you said about the lotto winners, okay? I had an experience to do a lot of tax returns for lotto winners, people that won the lottery.
Hold on. I forgot to tell you all, he's also an accountant.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, and so in the years of doing tax preparation and accounting, and these lotto members or winners, inevitably, they lost the money. Why? Because they don't have habits, good habits. And so the habits don't come with the money. It takes a while for one to get the habits. Give you another example. In our community, we boast about our credit score. I got a 700 credit score. I got 800 credit score. Wealthy people don't tell you about their credit score. It don't mean much.
Wow.
We tell you about our net worth. That was, my credit score, and you talked about in your sermon, credit represents bondage.
Wow.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, you can use credit, obviously, to get to a point that you use the credit to buy assets, but most of us do not. We use credit for, I want to get the reward points. We use credit for when we don't have to use credit. Credit should represent, I'm using it to get assets that will appreciate in value.
So one of the things that I didn't get a chance to talk about in last week's sermon was the abuse of credit. Because we live in a time or culture where you need credit in order to achieve certain things. Most people can't go out and pay cash for a home. Most people who check in a hotel or want to rent a car need some level of credit in order to be able to do that efficiently or effectively. And so it's not that we're saying abandon the concept of credit altogether. Our culture, unfortunately, is set up that way. we're saying don't abuse credit and misuse it so that you're now buying liabilities instead of assets.
Absolutely, absolutely right. Look at credit this way. And I challenge everyone, if you have credit, and in a given month, look at your credit card statement, said, I use this credit card to buy what? And if the item that you bought does not represent a true asset that's going to appreciate in your business, or you charge something that you put in your business that's going to make your business, better, then you have to look at, why am I using this credit card? Because otherwise, you're putting yourself in bondage with credit. And so that score is an integral part. It speaks to your integrity, right?
It's a character score.
It's a character score.
Yeah.
You and I talked about this. And saying that, what you say you're going to do, you do, and you're going to pay back. Look at it for that. Credit is no more than a tool like money. You have to use it appropriately. And most of us do not.
One of the things that you said, we've talked about it before, is that on a balance sheet, as an accountant, credit goes where?
It's under liabilities. So on every balance sheet, if you apply, put it this way, every one of us apply for credit, right? And they ask you, for your net worth statement. Net worth is the key, your net worth. If you look at a balance sheet, what's the first thing on a financial statement? Cash. What's the second thing? Accounts receivable. What's the third thing? My house. What's the next thing? My artwork. What's the next thing? My jewelry. What does credit appear? Under liabilities. That's what you owe. And so if you take credit and look at its position in your life, it represents debt. And so, in Proverbs, coming up, and I wasn't a Bible scholar, as you know. You helped me a great degree at that. But, I've gotten better, but I understood Proverbs and some of the things in Proverbs, speaking of that, in terms of being the lender, not the borrower, what that actually means. What does that stand in my life? And so I can say now, I'm lending my knowledge. I may lend other resources. And so in terms of borrowing, being that borrower in terms of credit, overall, it puts you in a position where you have little control of your life.
How so? Say more about that.
Well, control. I had a story when I was growing up, this guy who's now gone, and I was a teenager, and I watched him. He had his limousine, and he lived on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. And I asked him, I says, listen, what's the secret here? What's the secret sauce? And he says, Mark, well, building relationships. He's the first one that kind of made that deposit. And he said, you want to have control over your life. And so the example he gave, if I wake up tomorrow and I have the sniffles and a sore throat, I don't have to call 10 people and tell them I'm not coming in or I'm not doing this. I have control in that way. And that doesn't mean that, you go out and quit your job tomorrow, but your aspiration to be, how do I get control over my life in terms of what I'm doing? Driving a car, do you really own that car? This house, do you really own it? I talked about this. If you put on your best outfit, all right, and look your best, when you look in the mirror, do you look the same way on paper?
Yeah.
So I look really good in this mirror. But how do I look on paper?
Yeah. What is your financial picture?
Yeah, what's my financial picture?
Yeah.
If you look at me in the mirror, it looks like I own the world. I got on the best clothes, I got on the designer clothes, I get in my car, I got the best car. What do you look on paper?
Wow.
And most of us in paper, people we've known, it's just full with debt. So you don't look as good in the mirror as you look on paper.
So something else that you've discussed with me, or we've talked about in the past, is about cash being king. You have said that to me 1,000,001 times if you said it once. Pastor, cash is king. Can you give us a little more insights into that concept?
Well, as you know, Pastor, you warned me about getting the book out, and one day, hopefully, God willing, I'll get this book out.
He's going to get a book out.
But,
don't worry.
I take chess as a great metaphor. And when you play chess, or if you don't even play chess, you know something about chess. And you have the king and the queen, you have the pawns. The pawns are the most on the chessboard for a reason, and they're also the weakest. It's the most and they're the weakest, right? And so when you look at the queen's position, I say the queen is credit, okay? And when the queen is compromised, meaning your credit is compromised, you still can play the game. You can lose your queen because that's credit. you can't lose that king. It's called checkmate. A king is cash. And so when I look at the dynamics of that, if your cash is compromised, you're in trouble. That's called check. No more cash, it's called checkmate. So the queen is that just the credit. Can you play without credit? Absolutely. The cash is king because cash backs up credit. Because at some point, when the music stops in the room and you got all this credit, and that's what we saw in 2008, 2009, and we will see it again. If you do not have cash backing up their credit, it goes back to that mirror. You look really good in that mirror. But however, your paper is all about credit.
We've seen that variable now in this COVID culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in the pandemic.
Absolutely.
You've seen people, if their cash position wasn't strong, then credit only takes them so far. Right. And nobody anticipated that it was going to last this long or that they were going to have to extend themselves or overextend themselves this long because there was no moratorium on your note. They gave a moratorium on rent, but not on your house note. So if you owned your home, you got behind if you didn't have the cash position to be able to sustain it. And there were people that lost their jobs, were laid off, unemployed during this time. Even if they had credit, they could charge so much, but the payment was still due. They didn't cut off our need to make our payments every month. So, to your point, that is another reason that cash is so valuable to have.
Yeah, I mean, even during the pandemic and everyone, obviously, everyone's in a different position, relatively speaking, but, those individuals that are wealthy and have cash, they were not complaining. Because, a position, wealth sets you up for, the unexpected. If you're wealthy, you can endure the unexpected. Cash is, again, once it's gone, it's gone. And so that wealth model becomes important because, again, it's based on relationships. It's based on things that you did over a period of time. You and I have a relationship, and so in the case where you needed something outside of cash, he says, I can call Mark Wells. He knows this person may know this person, and vice versa. Those are relationships. And so what we live in, man, some young people and old people too, maybe more older than younger, they don't understand the concept of building relationships. And sometimes relationships are uncomfortable because in order to really, truly grow, you have to have discomfort. You have to. That's the main ingredient in growth. What's the number one ingredient in growth? I gotta go through discomfort. And what that does, we have to get around outside of family members. These are things that you spoke about. And so when I listen to your sermons, all the time, you're giving it to them really in the biblical sense. Mine may be more practical, but it's the same result. And so to get that wealth model, you may have to leave, some friends that you're comfortable with. You have to grow.
Wow.
You might have to eat some food that you not necessarily can see yourself eating. You have to grow.
Back up to go forward.
All that's part of the wealth process.
So you talked about relationships and the value of it. What about the relationships that I have with businesses or lending institutions or banks?
Okay.
Talk about that, because you and I have had great conversation about that.
Okay. The habits of a wealthy versus banks. And you and I talked about it. I pick a bank based on my needs, okay? The wealthy people, and I'll just say this, I'm using the term, really general, but what I mean by it, I don't pick a bank based on the number of ATMs they have. How convenient it is for me. You understand? I go into my bank, if I was to call my banker now and says, listen, I need a wire, I need this, whatever. Okay, Mr. Wells, Mark, whatever. Okay, when do you need it, where do you need it? I want to buy a car, okay, send a purchase order. Those are relationships. And so, if I'm sitting around and telling or counseling a group of people, your bank, you want to build a relationship with. It all starts with relationships. So a lawyer, don't get a lawyer. If you're going into business, don't get the lawyer when someone's knocking on your door and telling you you're in trouble. That's not a relationship because that exchange is very transactional. You call in a lawyer, I got a problem, can you help me? This is how much it's gonna cost. The other side of that from a wealth model, hey, Joe, Mary, whatever, someone is knocking at my door. Find out what they want. Give them my card and have them call me. You see it on television work that way. That's how it works.
So how do I select the bank that I'm going to have a relationship with, and how do I establish the relationship?
Well, you do it in the beginning. I'm a big believer, as you know, in terms of going into business or whatever I do, you set the foundation. Without the foundation, it's going to crumble, regardless. You talked about that. Foundation's not sound, it's going to crumble. No matter, again, it goes back, no matter how luxurious you are and what the people say you have going on, if your foundation is shaky, we see it all the time. It crumbles. Because as soon as that storm comes in life, it's gone. And so going back to your question at the very beginning, what one should do is, I understand my business is this, whatever your widget business is. And in 6 months, I'm gonna have these types of needs. Then you seek out a bank, small bank in particular. You know, as you know, I'm not fond of the bigger banks unless you have big business. Now, if you want to go to Chase and Citibank and all this, when you have big business, then they're going to service your needs. That may not be the politically correct thing to say, but that's the truth. You know, you tell them I'm starting a business, I'm going to make $100,000 the first year. You know, what is Chase going to do for you that? To be honest with you. Find a small community bank that you can walk in, tell them that I'm opening an account, starting a business, I'm opening this account, gets assigned to someone, and you build a relationship with them. Pick your bank, pick your lawyer, pick your accountant. Don't do these things when you're in need, and we often do it when we're in need.
One of the things that that I learned from you along this journey, even as it relates to the church's finance and our banking situation, one of the things that I learned is that you interview your bank.
Absolutely.
As if they work for you.
And they do.
And you go, and they do. And they do.
And they do.
I'm a testimony that they do. Yeah, so what does that interview process look like? What should I be looking for and what should I say?
Well, I mean, look at the exchange. You walk into the bank and you basically walk in the bank and you're going to take your money, your asset, and I'm depositing in your bank, understanding you're going to take my asset and loan it out to other people to make money. That's the bank's role. So before I enter into that transaction, on this end, understanding I'm going to be on the other end at some point, that money that you loan out, I want to be part of that process if that's going to fuel my business. And so you sit down with them and no different than you talking to, your boy, your girl, your boo or whatever, and you sit down and says, listen, this is my need. Are you going to be able to help me with my need? This is a business. And ask them for references. You walk in the bank and says, okay, you do small business. Well, who do you do? Who do you do?
What's your prayer? You said this once before. Ask them the percentage of small business loans for whatever field you're in.
Ask them. You're interviewing them. And so we always take the approach. When I say we always take the approach, I'm mainly speaking about our community, and that community can be whatever, but people I talk with, we take the approach that we are the customer and we are asking for something. It's a role in reverse. My lawyer is the customer. My bank is the customer. My accountant is the customer. So the exchange should be, well, I want to make as much money as I can and pay the least amount of taxes as I can. That is the goal of capitalism in America as we know it. Anyone says anything other? And then the money I make, I want to give it away in terms of philanthropy. That's the Jeff Bezos of the world. That's, the Bill Gates. That's the Zuckerbergs of the world. They're not trying to pay all the money out in taxes. Okay? What they want is less government intervention. And in turn, I want to have more resources so I can start committing to things I want to commit to. I want to give more to victory. Well, I can't give more to victory if I'm paying all the income taxes. That's not the wealth model. The wealth model is I want my account to understand what I do. I want to pay the least amount of taxes. Now, legally is the operative word here.
Yes.
Okay? So
by all
legally
means,
is the operative word.
Yeah.
So but once you accomplish that, then that's the goal of business. My lawyer is the same way. Your lawyer says, well, listen to your advice, but ultimately you got to make this decision yourself. It's either, the consequence rests on you.
Right.
So why would you put your consequence in someone else's hand? You take their legal advice, but the consequence rests on you.
I want to just give this. We have so much that we could talk about. I wish we had more time, but we don't. But it's one thing I want to make sure that I share with you, and this is my experience. This is my own personal testimony with the church, with Victory, and with my personal finances. I took your advice about we need a small bank. We need a community bank because I had such anxiety with the big banks. I mean, we had Bank of America, we had Chase, and we have PNC. And so we were I was frustrated because we actually were financially solvent. We had thousands of members at our congregation. I mean, thousands every week. We had hundreds joining at a time. We had major commitments and pledges from all of the people. We had a major thrusting campaign. I mean, we had energy, excitement, passion, but we could not get any of the bigger banks to do business with us so that we could buy the strip mall that we now currently own.
Right.
And so that was frustrating to me, and I openly voiced that to the congregation.
I was there.
Yeah, I know, and I know, and he had decided that he wasn't going to help because he didn't want to get involved and engaged at that level, especially with a church, because he's a businessman, right? And so God literally pushed him. One day I'll let him tell you the testimony. Literally pushed him to a place of discomfort so that he could grow spiritually and even grow in kingdom service. And the first thing that he did was make sure that on paper we looked as good as we did in the mirror. You know, we had everything that we needed. I mean, to look good on paper, we just didn't have the paper. And so he made sure that we looked good on paper, as good as we did to our congregation, to ourselves, and in the mirror. And that on paper we lived up to the hype of what it really was. It wasn't really in hype, to the reality, because we were in a fruitful and a favored season. This church is favored. I don't know if you figured it out, but we then went a step further, and we didn't close our accounts, but we abandoned looking at the big banks for our next move or our next season of increase and enlargement and conquering territory. And he took me to Seaway Bank, which was at the time Black owned, a smaller community bank on the south side of Chicago. He walked us into Seaway. As a matter of fact, he walked me, literally, physically walked me through Seaway. I took pictures with all the people in the bank who were fans of the ministry and the music. And they were gracious enough to take us through the ringer, vet us very thoroughly, took us through all of the, federal required processes, and they saw immediately, oh, this is a great, strong congregation church, and the pastor has a brand of his own, so this is a win-win for us. They did the deal, and then this is why the relationship, I'm going to speak to, I'm echoing the sentiment that you've already given, but this is why the relationship is so valuable, because after that, I had literally sacrificed, my wife and I, we had sacrificed so greatly to make sure that the church, that God's people had a home, that God's house was secured. And we were still in our first home for, years and years and years, but we were ready. Our family was growing. We had been victorious in conquering this major mountain, and we were ready to buy our own home or another home, a bigger home. And so we bought a bigger house, but get this, I went to Mark and said, hey, Mark, I want to buy this home, because Mark is a real estate guru. I didn't even get a chance to talk about his real estate. I mean, the man owns half of Chicago. You just don't know it. But I know his real estate savvy and his knowledge. And I said, hey, man, I want to buy a new home. It's time for us to, upgrade our house. And I went to Mark. Mark says, hold on, Pastor, let me do this. I'm going to call the bank, and we're going to talk to them. First of all, they didn't have to run anything because they had everything. Right. They had all of my information. They wanted a pint of my blood and, my firstborn in order for me to get the first loan for the church. So I didn't have to go through any more vetting, and the relationship was established because they knew the financial solvency. They knew they had a relationship with me by this time. And Mark says, hey, I'm going to call the bank. They're going to do the deal. So don't worry about it. I said, okay, we'll see. It was a few minutes later, man, he's calling me back. He said, okay, fine, Pastor, just sign. They're going to send over the paperwork, sign it. Never went to the bank again. Signed the paperwork at home. Signed it at home. All right. Yeah. Sent it back. And then Mark, of course, went and did what he does on the real estate side and secured the contract. Right. With the people that said, and my wife is she's so faith-filled that she told Mark a number to go and put on the house, and he laughed.
She a gangster Christian.
She a gangster Christian.
Christian gangster Christian, something.
First Lady Carla, he talking about you now. But she did. She gave him a number that was unreasonable. And even Mark laughed and said, man, they're not going to go for that. She said, just tell them when I see it. And of course, he went and came back and said, it's a deal. I want you to get this. This is why relationships, this is why interviewing your bank, this is why smaller banks could be a benefit or an asset to you in this season. We closed on that house in 15 days, which is unheard of. Most of you can attest to this. And there was no problem. As a matter of fact, we sat down at the closing table, and they were like, well, it may be hours before, it's actually funded, so we've got to wait. No, it was actually there first thing that morning. And the realtor from the other side was like, I just never seen anything like this. How did you guys pull this off? Well, you know me with my spiritual mindset. I said, well, the Lord showed up. But it was, and of course it is God's doing, and it's truly marvelous in my eyes, but it was also the wisdom. Remember that I said wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. We had both, and we were able to see God work on our behalf, open doors, and supernaturally in short time, in miraculously short period of time, to accomplish a major milestone in our lives. So,
I tell you, Pastor, you really, in summation, told the entire story. Because I had Smokie Norful in the mirror, right? And so Smokie Norful brand in the mirror. And so you're correct. I was sitting, in the audience, and I'll be very brief. And, Pastor was talking about Bank of America and Chase Banks, and, they don't do church loans. And, God spoke to me, you're going to help them. No, I'm not. But anyway, the short of it is, I eventually, made my way down and spoke to the pastor at the time, and told them that I can help them with the bank process, probably. But speaking to Pastor's story, the narrative of his story, it started with a relationship. Going to a smaller bank in which I had a relationship with, who was the chairman at the time, and saying, hey, I have Smokie Norful in the mirror. You understand? I have you. And so, well, what does the paper look like? Well, the documents was there. It was just at that particular time, obviously, we did projections and everything. But I have Smokie Norful in the mirror and everything to back it up. And so subsequent to that, the relationship was formatted, and, the rest is history. And that's how it works. And we're not accustomed to that because we don't have those habits. It's no different than going into a restaurant, which fork to use. You don't use, a spoon to eat spaghetti. That's not a good habit. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to develop better habits. Banking is one. Don't bank because they have a lot of ATM machines. What good is that? Because, or they charge you anyway. My bank doesn't charge me for a cashier's check. That's a currency exchange. A money order. That's a currency exchange. So, understand the power that you have. And then when you understand the power you have, you develop better habits. And so people come to me, obviously, we're going to talk about real estate a little bit. I want to go into real estate. Well, yeah, okay. But what are your habits? When we look at wealth on our end, and I'm talking to a renter versus a homeowner, do you understand that, a renter gets no deductions? You get no interest deduction. You get no real estate tax deduction for your property taxes. So why, when you get to a certain point, you not want to own real estate? It's advantageous. The tax code is for the wealthy. It's not for the working person. I shouldn't say that, but it's really not. You pay your taxes, but the tax code is built around the wealthy. And what I mean by wealthy, not a lot of money, making better decisions. When we talk about, you just said it today, leave your children's legacy.
Yes.
Do estate planning. Go to your financial planner. We, our community, of a lot of us, we don't leave our children's children anything because we got a bad habit.
Well, we leave them the flowers on our grave.
Yeah. That's it. And they on credit.
And they fight over that.
And they on credit. There's some credit card receipt around with that on it.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of just developing better habits, if you want to leave, part of your children's children, that legacy is to have assets. We leave them credit. We don't leave them assets.
Debt.
We're debt, credit. That's what we leave them. And so we want to leave an asset base. And so if I say nothing more, be asset minded. So when you're looking at the glass, is it half empty or half full? My glass is always half full because that's the habit I have. Half empty is going to make me make desperate decisions because I look at it as almost gone. If it's half full, I got a lot left. See, the wealthy always has something, one last go up, because that's what's going to get them to the next point. And so your habits.
So one of the things that I want to make sure that you don't miss, and I got to wrap this up, but I want to make sure you don't miss this, is that when you're buying anything, ask yourself, is it appreciating or is it depreciating? Is it earning money or is it losing money? And that is a great habit to take into consideration. Before you buy the car, is it going to lose money? Yes. Or is it making money? Before you buy the jewelry, is it appreciating or is it something that's going to be obsolete and you're going to be losing money? Some of those things, both cars, jewelry, artwork, some of those things actually do appreciate. So it's not even a matter of don't get those things. It's just which things are you getting? How are you getting them? And do you really need them at this particular juncture of time? And are they appreciating or depreciating? Because if you buy the right car, it appreciates. Like it literally,
Absolutely.
especially after a certain period of time.
Absolutely.
If you keep it in tip-top shape for a certain amount of time, it will appreciate. If you buy that diamond, or I have a Cartier watch that I brought when I got my first big check as a recording artist. I bought me a Cartier watch. We were out of the country, and it was supposedly cheaper than it was anywhere else.
Right.
And over the years, they don't make that watch anymore. I have all of the documentation, the appraisal and all this stuff. Over the years, it has appreciated significantly. And that's something that I now get to leave in my will and my estate for my children, which by then it'll be greatly appreciated, And so just make sure that you keep that in mind. Mark, thank you, man.
Man, it's a pleasure.
Thank
Anytime.
you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's so much more that we could talk about, but of course I'm way beyond and out of my time. But I just thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to just have this candid conversation in your presence. And I pray that something that you get out of this is going to be a blessing to you.